Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Spain, the death toll from the new coronavirus has risen to over 7,300 with 812 new deaths and over 85,000 cases. Spain overtook China's total number of coronavirus cases on Monday. Iran has reported 170 new deaths, raising its tally to more than 2,750 with over 41,000 infections. France's death toll jumped by 13% on Sunday, taking the total to 2,606. Elsewhere in the EU, the number of cases in Germany has risen to 57,298 and 455 people have died. China reported a drop in new infections for a fourth day as drastic curbs on international travelers reined in the number of imported cases. U.S. President Donald Trump extended his stay-at-home guidelines until the end of April as the country deals with 139,000 infections and more than 2,400 fatalities. He dropped the contentious plan to get the economy up and running by mid-April after a top medical advisor said more than 100,000 Americans could die from the outbreak. Worldwide, the number of infections rose to over 730,000 with more than 34,000 deaths and over 150,000 recoveries. Moving on, India, China, France, Italy and the UK have implemented world's largest and most restrictive mass quarantines. Details in this report.
Over a third of the planet's population is under some form of a lockdown. Governments have banned mass gatherings, congregations, and extended stay-at-home guidelines as the pandemic continues to spread. Russia has locked down Moscow, while UK's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jenny Harries says restrictive measures may last for 6 months or even more.
So I think 3 weeks for review, 2 or 3 months to see whether we've really squashed it, but about 3 to 6 months ideally, and lots of uncertainty in that, but then to see at which point we can actually get back to normal. And it is plausible that it could go further than that. We just need to wait to see how successful we've been.
In Africa, Nigeria ordered a 14-day cessation of movement in Lagos and Abuja to contain the spread of the virus. President Donald Trump's refusal to impose a lockdown has been met with widespread national criticism, as many believe it led to the exponential spread. But Trump insists he has done a very good job.
So you're talking about 2.2 million deaths, 2.2 million people from this. And so if we could hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000, it's a horrible number. Maybe even less, but to 100,000. So we have between 100 and 200,000. We all together have done a very good job.
In India, an unplanned, sudden, and poorly executed countrywide curfew has triggered a mass exodus and has led to the deaths of migrant workers from the cities. Experts say the abrupt lockdown has amplified the risk of spreading the disease.
The UK's top epidemiologist, Professor Neil Ferguson, says the coronavirus antibody tests will be ready in days. Professor Ferguson says only 2 to 3% of the UK's population has been infected. He said almost 40% did not get any symptoms at all. Ferguson says antibody tests are in the final stage of validation. Meanwhile, in Australia, a vaccine for tuberculosis is being given to healthcare workers to see if it guards against COVID-19. The World Health Organization says it is important to know whether the Bacillus McCamilliae shot used to cure TB can reduce coronavirus. The WHO is encouraging international groups to collaborate with the head of infectious diseases research in Melbourne, Nigel Curtis, who is leading the study. In Pakistan, highways across the country will remain open to ensure the transport of food, goods amid the coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Imran Khan took the decision after provincial governments imposed a lockdown. The government will also increase the number of freight trains to avert a shortage of food and other essential supplies. Meanwhile, the Health Ministry has reported 1,625 infections with 21 deaths so far across the country. The ministry said 28 people have recovered from deadly virus. It said 45 cases of infection have been reported since yesterday, while 11 patients are in critical condition. The data shows 508 infections in Sindh, 593 in Punjab, 144 in Balochistan, 195 in KP, 128 in Gilgit-Baltistan, and 51 in the capital, Islamabad. In another news, Afghanistan's government says the Taliban prisoners' release scheduled for tomorrow will not happen. In the Doha peace deal, the US assured the release of 5,000 Taliban prisoners before intra-Afghan talks. National Security Council spokesperson Javed Faisal says the Taliban agreed to send a team to Kabul to hold further technical discussions. Kabul officials and the fighters held a video conference yesterday in which the decision was reached. Officials say talks were held in the presence of officials from the US Embassy, Qatar's Foreign Ministry, and Red Cross officials. They said the Afghan government will host Taliban at Bagram City for the next dialogue. Kabul says 27 security personnel have been killed and 6 others wounded in Taliban attacks in Afghanistan's Zabul and Takhar provinces. Police say the fighters targeted posts in Khwaja Ghair and Arghanbad districts. State police said the policemen were wounded in the ambush in Takhar as forces retaliated against the fighters. Meanwhile, the Zabul governor told media the attack was carried out by a Taliban infiltrator last night. Afghan Ministry of Defense says the Taliban also suffered casualties in Zabul, but did not provide an exact figure. The Taliban have not yet claimed responsibility for the attacks. More from Afghanistan. A group of volunteers has disinfected shops, vehicles, and streets of Kabul with hopes of stopping the spread of coronavirus. The group is supported by a few Afghan private companies. Let's find out more in this report.
On Saturday, the government ordered all shops, restaurants, mosques, and public transport in capital Kabul to close until further notice. Many volunteers have stepped up to join the fight against spread of the disease wreaking havoc worldwide. They have also requested the beleaguered Kabul government for its support.
We have volunteered to disinfect all the public places from the threat of the virus. We ask the government and especially the Public Health Ministry to support and provide the equipment to all the organizations working in this field so they can continue the combat against the virus.
Afghan Health Ministry said there are 110 confirmed cases of COVID-19 with 5 deaths so far. There are fears that Afghanistan's health system, devastated by years of war, would be overwhelmed by an outbreak. But residents in Kabul breathed a sigh of relief and appreciated volunteers' efforts towards disinfection.
I appreciate this measure carried out by these men to disinfect the city from the virus. These types of actions will keep us safe from the virus.
Officials say an overwhelming majority of cases are linked to neighboring Iran amid the sudden return of thousands of refugees. The authorities have warned that the spread of the virus in capital would put over 5 million at risk.
In India, 17 migrant workers and their family members have died while struggling to return home amid countrywide lockdown. This comes after Prime Minister Narendra Modi imposed a sudden 21-day lockdown to contain the spread of the new coronavirus. Medics say they died of exhaustion, fatigue, and road accidents in different parts of the country. In Rajasthan, thousands of migrant workers from various industries have been abandoned by their employers. The workers were left without food and later shunted from one bus station to another for transport. Meanwhile, the central government has directed the states to close their borders to stop migrants' long walk home. Iran has accused the US of waging medical terrorism against the country amid the coronavirus pandemic. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, "The world community must stop aiding war crimes and obeying illegal US sanctions." Zarif said the US has gone from sabotage and assassinations to waging an economic war and economic terrorism on Iranians. He said, "This even exceeds what would be permissible on the battlefield." Meanwhile, President Hassan Rouhani also criticized the Kurds, saying it is not the time for political war. He hailed Iran's handling of the novel coronavirus, saying the disease has cemented national unity. Iran has so far reported 2,640 deaths and over 38 infections due to the deadly virus. Yemen's Houthi rebels say they will continue to target Saudi cities in response to the coalition's continued aggression. National Delegation head Mohammad Abdul Salam said yesterday's strikes on Saudi targets were an act of self-defense. Abdul Salam said the coalition will have to stop offensive and lift the siege against Houthis if they want a ceasefire. He said the explicit declaration to end aggression is the solution. This comes after the Houthis accused the Saudi-led coalition of carrying out airstrikes in Yemen's Hajjah city. Yesterday, Saudi Arabia intercepted 2 ballistic missiles fired by the rebels over Riyadh and Jazan. The US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces say ISIS prisoners have seized control of the ground floor of a major prison in northeastern Syria. SDF spokesperson Mustafa Bali said some prisoners managed to escape after removing internal walls of the Hasaka prison. Bali said they have sent anti-terror forces and additional troops to control the situation. US-led coalition spokesperson Colonel Miles Gaggins said the prisoner holds low-level ISIS fighters. Gaggins said the coalition is assisting SDF with aerial surveillance. Earlier, Syrian state television said 12 ISIS militants fled from the prison towards the southern outskirts of Hasaka. The United Nations has warned that the coronavirus spike can cause a total collapse of Gaza's healthcare system. UN coordinator for the Palestinian territories, Jamie McGoldrick, says the local facilities cannot deal with a large number of cases. McGoldrick said there are only 60 ventilators in the Gaza Strip for all medical emergencies among the population of 2 million. The UN has allocated $34 million for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza to cover a 90-day period. The total number of infections in Palestine has reached 109 with 1 death. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. A governor in Somalia's Puntland has been killed in a suicide bombing by the Al-Shabaab militant group. Police say Abdus Salam Hassan Harsi, governor of Nagal region, succumbed to his injuries after being rushed to a hospital. Police said the governor died less than an hour after being admitted to the intensive care ward. It said a former police commander and a civilian also wounded in the blast were being treated. Witnesses say the attacker ran towards the governor's vehicle before detonating a suicide vest. In a statement, Al-Shabaab militant group claimed responsibility for the attack. Polls have closed in Mali's long-delayed parliamentary elections, which were held despite concerns about security and the coronavirus pandemic. The vote was held despite the abduction of main opposition leader Somalia Sisi by unidentified gunmen. The government's election spokesperson Amini Belko Maiga said voting conditions were not ideal, but they had to go through with it. A second round is scheduled for April 19th. The vote will elect new MPs to the 147-seat National Assembly for the first time since 2013. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's Rally for Mali party won a substantial majority in 2013 polls and remains in government since then. The country has been plagued by conflict since 2012 when rebels captured much of Mali's arid north. North Korea says it has successfully tested super-large multiple rocket launchers. State media said yesterday's test was aimed at verifying strategic and technical features of the launchers. The state media, KCNA, did not give details about the weapon or site of launch. It quoted authorities saying the deployment of the weapon system is crucial for national defense. Yesterday, the South Korean military said North fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea. It said the missiles were fired from the coastal city of Wonsan, flying 230 kilometers with a maximum altitude of 30 kilometers. The rocket launch marks the North's 4th major weapons test this month. President Donald Trump says the U.S. will not foot the bill for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's security. Trump's announcement follows reports of the couple's arrival in Los Angeles, California. In a tweet, Trump said he is a great friend and admirer of the Queen and the UK, but the couple will have to pay for security. In a statement, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex said they had no plans to ask for publicly funded protection during their stay in the US. Last month, Canada announced it will stop providing security assistance to the family in keeping with their change in status. In France, the finance minister Bruno Le Maire says the government will not tolerate companies receiving financial support from the government to carry out share buybacks or pay dividends.
Le Maire said companies will not be allowed to pay a dividend to shareholders in order to ensure their cash stayed invested in the business. He said buybacks will not be compatible with benefiting from state support, as the rescue packages aim to allow companies to survive the fallout of pandemic.
Nous ne tolérerons pas non plus.
We will not tolerate that companies carry out share buybacks or pay dividends to their shareholders. Share buybacks should not be possible when we pay dividends, since it's an artificial way of increasing dividends, and so share buybacks will not be compatible with benefiting from the state support for more companies impacted by coronavirus lockdown.
Le Maire said France is ready to protect its most strategic companies through increased state contributions and temporary nationalism. The finance minister warned the government won't allow investors to profit at the expense of economic and industrial sovereignty.
In Spain, the digging of illegal wells to irrigate crops is becoming an increasingly common practice. In the southern part of the country, one small town has become the epicenter of groundwater theft. Experts blame climate change, rising temperature, and changing rain patterns for the overexploitation of important aquifers. Let's find out more in this report.
Water is becoming an increasingly scarce resource in Spain. This has led to the digging of illegal wells to irrigate crops. In 2006, the government estimated there were 500,000 illegal wells being used in the country. In a recent study, Greenpeace estimated the quantity of water stolen in the country could be used by 118 million people. In southern Spain, the small town of Lucena del Puerto has become a hub for water theft. Recently, the government blocked around 100 boreholes in the area.
The village is risking it all. We are risking it all, front or cross. If those hectares, the ones in the village, are closed, the village is falling through because we currently have 1.800 acres outside the village. That never happened in this village. We, with 1.500 hectares, produced 43 million kilograms of fruits. If those hectares are built up, then the village will probably go down the drain.
Local farmers are unhappy with the current situation. They argue that the legalization of such wells would solve many of their hurdles, and they complain that the government is shutting down important sources of water without offering an alternative.
If I have been sowing this land for so many years, I'm not the illegal one. I will be the illegal one, but not the illegal one, because you know that I'm here. You have been there many times. So why do you come now to the point? You have been here many times. So why do you come now to point your finger at us? Not to point your finger at us, but to come and close our wells without giving us any other solution.
In some cases, these boreholes are just meters away from Andalusia's Donana National Park, which depends on the same underground aquifers. Environmental experts say climate change, rising temperature, and changing rain patterns are what led to the overexploitation of water resources.
We can say that it is a phenomena that is slightly rising, or we have detected that is slightly rising due to the geographic situation of Spain, also because of climate change, the rising of temperatures, and the change of numerous farms from dry lands to irrigated lands, which means we are effectively finding an overexploitation of the aquifers, and that we find more illegal extractions.
2/3 of Spain is at risk of desertification. Greenpeace Spain says if these reserves are not preserved, the country will have to face disastrous consequences.
In China, a coal district that has been a source of energy for Beijing for 300 years is finally being abandoned. The government is taking the step in an effort to tackle the city's smog problem. More in this report.
China is the largest producer and consumer of coal in the world. This had serious environmental consequences for the country. To cut carbon emissions, Beijing started moving away from coal power in 2010. Domestic coal production has also decreased with every passing year. Now, Beijing is way on its way to leave the list of 200 most polluted cities. 270 coal mines in the area have been shut down over the past 2 decades. The last mine is scheduled to fully close later this year.
They have all closed. We are the last one. Once this one closes, there won't be any coal mines in Beijing anymore.
Coal mining also has severe consequences for miners' health. A miner from Guizhou said he was diagnosed with black lung disease last year. The government has promised 380,000 won in compensation for sick workers.
The main thing about this kind of illness is lung trouble. It takes a lot of effort to go outside. It's not like other diseases you can cure. It can't be cured. It's already caused your lungs to accumulate a layer of stuff. It's incurable.
The CCP now plans to turn the town into an eco-park. Beijing's subway line is being extended for tourists for this purpose.
Stock markets across European markets fall amid a choppy session as investors remain focused on the coronavirus. Regional stocks have witnessed a volatile session as stimulus measures fail to attract stability amid calls for extended lockdown. London's FTSE 100 is trading over 0.5% lower. The CAC 40 in Paris has lost over 1%. Meanwhile, the DAX in Frankfurt is also trading fractionally lower. Stocks in major Asia-Pacific markets were mixed as investors continue to assess the economic impact of the pandemic. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.